Well, hello, Mary. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm excited to be able to share your story with lots of listeners.
Oh, well, thank you.
So, Mary, to start, can you tell me a little bit about your arthritis? So if you can start with sort of when you first noticed symptoms and how you eventually ended up getting diagnosed, the arthritis story that precedes the use of yoga.
Okay. So I've always just kind of had achy joints, and when I would try to exercise, things would hurt, and it never was really clear. It was never really severe, but it was enough that it prevented me from keeping going. You know, like it was just the activity was always interfered.
So was that
with
all the way back to your childhood, Mary? Or
yeah, I mean, I remember it probably in my teens, definitely early 20s, when I had an active job, and it was, I would be really active for a while, and then my back would hurt, or I would garden, and then I'd just be laid up for a few days, and then, it was just like normal things, but lifting or, bending over, or, a lot of spinal things, but also hips and knees and my hands, and, things were just like that. And I wasn't a very athletic kid, always a little overweight, always not very sporty, not very active, but some of it was sort of worked both ways. Like some of that was because I didn't move because I hurt, and some of it was because, weight affects your knees and your joints. So it worked both ways. But when you're younger and relatively seemingly healthy, a lot is attributed just to that. Like you should work out more, you should exercise more. But then I would hurt myself when I would exercise. So it kind of worked, it was both ways. And there was never any kind of diagnosis in the beginning, and I just kind of accepted, like, I'm just not athletic, so I'm not good at this stuff. And pain just kept increasing, and, I didn't really want to take a lot of medicine for it, but it wasn't like going to a doctor with a specific thing, because it was always different. Like, today my back hurts, tomorrow my hands are stiff, it just was never really like an acute one thing hurt, So I actually just went to yoga because I wanted to do activity, and every time I would get really into the gym, I would hurt myself. Like I would do stuff, and then my shoulder would hurt so bad, like I couldn't do it anymore, and it just didn't seem like the right direction. So I saw a billboard one day that said, yoga first class free. And I was like, okay, well, I have absolutely nothing to lose. Let me go try this. So I went, and I remember thinking after the class, like, that's the first time my body ever did what I told it to do. It was like a very interesting realization in yoga,
so, Mary,
that mind-body connection.
When you saw that sign that told you that the first class was going to be free, were you thinking of going to that yoga class because you thought maybe it would be an accessible way for you to be active, or did you actually think that it might help with some of the things you were experiencing?
I actually had been reading a few things, had been floating around the media about this thing called yoga. And I thought, well, I've tried everything else. That sounds interesting. Maybe
and
it could be point, it was more exercise. Like I was hoping it would be exercise that would just help me. I didn't have
and you still didn't have any kind of diagnosis at this point, right?
No, because
you just knew my body hurts. Maybe yoga would help me to hurt less.
Yeah, it was really from the pain management aspect. Like I need, and I always just all the doctors are like, you just need to exercise. Well, every time I do or did, I would hurt, or I would hurt myself. So because of whatever was going on in my body. So I went to yoga, did that first class, was hooked from the first day, loved it, but there were still times when my body hurt from yoga even, because it's new activity, moving in a lot of different directions.
And you were a young adult at this point?
Yeah, I was 30.
Okay.
30 at this time. So went to yoga, got really into yoga, going multiple times a week. After the first 6 months of yoga, I started a home practice. I've been doing it every day at home for the last 16 years from that day, because my body feels better when I do it, period. No doubt about it. But then my body started to hurt worse. And I went to the doctor finally, went to an orthopedic surgeon. He took a back x-ray, and he said, well, why didn't you tell me you had scoliosis? And I said, well, I didn't know. Mm-hmm. So here I am, 30 years old, didn't know I had lumbar scoliosis, 45 degrees convex left. So
didn't you get elementary school scoliosis checks?
We did, and mine was always like they would look twice and then just pass on. You know, so as an overweight kid, it's harder to see it.
Especially the lumbar.
Yeah. Especially the lumbar. So they would look twice, one shoulder's lower than the other. Well, it's just her posture, move on. So no, I was never diagnosed with this. So what I did in yoga, because I was unaware of my scoliosis, I would push really hard on one side, thinking that I was tight on that side, like side bends, and I herniated a disc. So,
oh my goodness.
So now the doctor tells me, you have scoliosis, you also have arthritis, you also have degenerative disc disease, you have a herniated disc. Like, let me tell you about your spine and everything that you've been feeling for 30 years but never knew it, you know. Then
I bet that was sort of validating in some way.
It was like, oh, well, that makes sense. No wonder I never wear dresses. Like, that's something weird, but the reason is because my hips and shoulders are not level and dresses are crooked.
Oh, how interesting.
It's like your parents saying, well, stand up straight. I am. You know, like, I don't know that's different. So it's just one of those things that no wonder my left bra strap always falls down because of the scoliosis.
Okay, so Mary, you've had some procedures since then.
Yeah, so what I did was first learn about all of this stuff, like my spine, my arthritis, my herniations, and learned what to do and not do in yoga to prevent hurting myself further, but also to help myself. So I went from that point when they told me I needed surgery, another 15 years without having a major surgery, but I did along the way occasionally have like an epidural or injections, because over time the disc degeneration continues, the arthritis continues. I have spinal stenosis in the same area, and then I did get
And so for
injured.
those who don't know, Mary, spinal stenosis is a narrowing of the spinal opening, and so if the vertebrae starts to restrict the spine, our listeners can imagine how that might feel. In addition to when you have degeneration of the discs, then the vertebrae are closer together and it starts to close the openings where the nerves passed from the spinal cord out to the rest of the body. So I'm sure you were feeling the effects of nerve impingement, moving through various parts of your body in addition to what you were feeling in terms of your back pain.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, a lot. And then the scoliosis on top of that, so the vertebrae are crooked and mine are twisting forward. So it's just the nerves are getting crunched, like all through the lumbar.
Right. And this is actually, we sometimes talk about modalities like yoga as being, are they complementary? Are they alternative, integrative? And this highlights the importance of medical diagnosis because even though yoga was really helpful for managing your pain in ways that maybe medical pain management might not have been ideal. It was the diagnoses from the medical doctor that gave you the information you needed to practice yoga more safely and appropriately for your body, and probably part of why you were able to go 15 more years before you needed a procedure.
Exactly. And it's so important, the mind-body connection, because up until when I started yoga, there was no connection whatsoever. You know, I never had a good body image. I never felt good about my body. My body didn't do what I wanted it to do. It would always hurt when I did things that I liked to do. You know, it was like this whole separate thing. So yoga really helped me to understand and connect to my body, and then realize that I'm more than my body. So part of that 15 years was learning to accept the body that I have, the spine, the injuries, the arthritis, those things along the way. Accepting that caused me much less suffering, because I spent many of those first few years when I found out about all of my conditions trying to find someone to fix me, find a doctor who would fix me. And when I finally accepted, this is the body I have, these are the injuries I have, I remember thinking that so clearly. And the next day my pain was 50% less because I wasn't fighting it as much anymore. I just wasn't fighting it. I was accepting it.
Yeah, and I've heard other stories of people who have transformed their relationship with their body to be one of collaboration or partnership instead of adversarial. It's not me against my body. It's me alongside my body.
Right. Yeah.
Or together with my body, or something like that. And it's so interesting that shifted the very experience of your pain.
Yeah, it was. And, it was at the point where the doctors are like, well, we're just going to put you on pain patches for the rest of your life. And I'm 35 or 36 years old. That's not acceptable to me. That's not the answer, Right. So when I accepted that this is it, I'm going to adapt my life and live with it, it did get better. I was able to be patient with myself. A lot of my discs and the nerve pain with the right kind of just therapeutic yoga eased enough. Then I had another injury. I had an annular tear, so one of the discs tore. And that really provoked a lot of issues because the fluid leaks, it causes irritation, more scar tissue, more inflammation. Like all of these things are happening all in the area that all my issues are. And at that point, I came to the realization that eventually surgery is in the picture. And
well, Mary, if you could actually talk a little bit about, because I know that especially for a lot of yogis who want yoga to be the solution to everything worldwide, that it can be a very difficult decision to agree to having a surgery. So can you say a little bit about your process with that?
Yeah, it was really huge. Having arthritis and working with, at being a yoga teacher and taking your training, the Yoga for Arthritis, and working with arthritis students, rheumatoid arthritis, those things, I see the benefit of our medical system, our doctors, and our medicine. Like there is a place for all of that. If you ignore that, you're hurting yourself too. And I always tell my students that if the divine source, universe, God, whatever it is to you, is everywhere and everything, it's in that medicine too. He gave us the wisdom and the knowledge to make this. So, but it's still like being a yoga teacher, I was still really resistant to surgery. Partly because I know people who have been through it and it didn't help or it made it worse. But I got to the point where the nerve pain, it wasn't just pain anymore. My leg was going numb, and I was starting to get muscle weakness where I would stand up and not, like that leg wouldn't function. Like I would stand up and it didn't come with me. And I knew that if I let that go too far, I was going past the point of no return. Like there is only
you were going to be disabled.
Yeah, there was only so much you can do with your nerves. Like, and they do tests, and they can see my damage and regrowth, you know, like all this stuff. But it got to the point where procedures and injections were only lasting a few weeks, which was not acceptable. Like you should be getting 6 months to a year out of some of these things. So lasting a few weeks wasn't good. Not being able to stand still for more than about 30 seconds to a minute without moving to release the pain. So it was getting to that point where I didn't have much choice. Like I needed to make this decision. And years ago they had told me like I needed fusions and pins and rods and, you know, all of these things. But what I did was I decided to go to the best surgeon in town, like the best spinal surgeon in town. And when I got there, it was his partner that I was seeing because the partner does lumbar. This surgeon did cervical. Okay. So I saw the partner and never met him before, don't know anything about him. He walks in the door to the room, and the first thing he says is, "I'm not willing to reconstruct your spine." And I said, "Good, I don't want that." He's like, "Okay, now let's talk." So he was willing to not do fusions, not do hardware, just go in, clean it out, and decompress the nerves. So we talked a long time about all of the options, and I really, it was a very interesting dynamic. He was a very hard person to read, like personality-wise. So at the end of the conversation, he asked me what all of my tattoos were. So I have various tattoos around my body. And 3 of them are 3 Tibetan ohms. They were when I got my 500 hours. I got 2 ohms when I got my 200, then plus 3 when I got my 500 hours teacher training. And he goes, "Oh, I thought those looked familiar. I'm Buddhist." And then I had the realization that he was willing to not fuse my spine and not do the hardware because he actually respected what I did for a living as a yoga teacher. Most other medical professionals don't really give that a lot of credence. They don't really understand that when I say I'm sitting on the floor for 10 hours on a Saturday training teachers, it's actually what I'm doing, you know, or standing for hours at a time, or sitting in meditation. So he respected that, you know.
We sometimes talk in the Masters of Science in Yoga Therapy about our role as yoga therapists through surgery. So leading up to the surgery, during the surgery, or immediately after, and then during recovery. So for those who might be facing surgery or recovering from surgery, can you say something about the role that yoga, because you've had more than one surgery, right? You know, what the role that yoga has played in that process?
Yeah. So leading up to this surgery, so I had the nerve decompression in my lumbar. I was doing my yoga practice, but I was doing, and I've been doing for quite a while, every week, 36 sun salutations. Surya Namaskar A, 36 of them in a row, to really work on my core strength and to boost my prana, like to really keep my energy. And I just love it. Like I love yoga so much that is fun to me. So I do that every week, and I have for years. Twice a year we do 108 sun salutations, so primarily it was to keep my ability up to be able to do the 108. But it really is, and it's core work I'm willing to do. 36 planks is a lot of core work, you know. So I did that leading up to surgery. Had surgery, was in a back brace for 8 weeks. And I did chair yoga, no bending, lifting, or twisting. I followed the directions of the doctors and the therapists to a T because I didn't want to mess up what they'd already done. like they were fixing me. The day of my surgery, that night I woke up, I could tell it had worked because there was no pain. The numbness was already going away.
And what about the non-physical practices, the other aspects of yoga?
Yeah, so that's really the most important is, and my doctor told me, like, your recovery was so good because of your attitude, a positive mental attitude. And positive mental attitude comes from knowing that I'm more than my body, understanding the teachings of yoga and yoga philosophy. I understand that I'm more than just this, that I'm more than the pain, that I'm more than the effort that I have to go through. It was a really difficult recovery physically because I ended up with blood clots. Then I'm on blood thinners. Then my incision wouldn't heal. And so there's a lot of things, but knowing that I'm more than that, I never got down about it. Like I kept doing, and I would sit in chair yoga and just move my hands and move my arms and know I was still doing yoga. So I'm still connected to my physical practice. I did a lot of pranayama during that time to keep the energy boosted, to keep like that positive feeling and attitude boosted. Meditation, very important. My sun salutations are very meditative for me, so you can still be moving and be in a meditative state. So all of that contributed to just a sense of well-being no matter what was going to happen. I stood in the emergency room when they realized I had blood clots 3 days after my surgery, bilateral DVTs and a pulmonary embolism, standing in the middle of the emergency room wearing my back brace, everyone around me freaking out. And I'm just like, everybody just chill out. Where else do you want me to find this out? I'm just standing there, the most calm person in the building. Yeah. Just saying and they're like, get into bed. And I'm like, look, you're not going to rush me. I have to get into bed a certain way. I'm wearing a back brace. I just had spinal surgery. And that's my yoga. Like that's the yoga, calm, peaceful, content in the middle of this storm of everyone freaking out. And it's not that I don't realize it's life-threatening. I realize take 2 extra breaths, everyone. I'll get into bed. You can do what you need to do. It's fine. Either you have clots or you don't. Either you find out you have a blood clot or you died from it and didn't know. I was okay. I was all right. So yoga,
and I'm sure that is actually part of what has made you so resilient in all of the stages of these conditions, and probably a good part of how you manage your pain now, because I know that for you, like a lot of people with arthritis, it's, getting out of bed. You don't hop out of bed, like some of the rest of us. It's there's a lot that goes into you being able to function in a given day. So maybe say something about that.
It takes me 2.5 hours to get out of the house in the morning. And that is get up, take a hot shower, practice for about 45 to 50 minutes, yoga, very slow, very meditative, working all the joints, all the major muscle groups, sitting with heat or ice for 20 to 30 minutes, depending on what I need that day and where, if it's my knees or my hip or whatever's going on. Having breakfast, taking my vitamins, getting everything all together. So it takes me about 2.5 hours to get going. But then I'm good for the day. Like I've done my practice. I've done what I need to do self-care-wise, heat and ice and, all of that stuff to be up and ready to function.
Right. So I think that's important to point out. One, for people who don't have arthritis to have some little bit of understanding about what it requires in terms of this daily maintenance that, if people take for granted their ability to just, get out of bed in the morning and get on with their day, that provides some insight. But also to say, for those who are living with arthritis, it's not like now that you have a yoga practice, you're, it's
all
a cakewalk. You have to really, steady effort, right? You really have to. And yet, despite the fact that it takes you 2.5 hours to prepare your body for the day, you love that body.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and exactly. It's just one of those things that this is what I have. This is what I have to do. I've figured it out. Finally, I've figured it out. This is what I need to do, and then I can function the rest of the day just fine. Now, I still will have pain. Even though I had surgery, like the nerve pain and the numbness and the weakness, all that has been addressed. But I still have degenerative disc. I still have arthritis. My hands still get really stiff. Like, all those things are still there. But the pain is nowhere near what it was. Like, it's so significantly different. It's incredible.
And Mary, are there times that you lose your cool? Do you ever struggle to stay yogic with all of the challenges that you have day to day?
So not too much with, like, my own body and my own pain. Like, I really am at a really good point with that. I do, I just got tennis elbow a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, really, I'm the least athletic person anybody knows. How do I have tennis elbow? Never picked up a tennis racket. So it's a repetitive motion injury. So trying to figure that out. It's one of those things that I'm sure years ago I would have been more upset or worried about, but now it's just like, well, okay, well, let's just figure this one out. It's just like one more thing. I don't have rheumatoid arthritis, but my RA marker is pretty high. So I have inflammatory things that happen, but I don't get freaked out about them, and it doesn't really upset me. Of course, I would lose my cool with some, business situations, but I try to stay really anchored in my practice to not.
Because I would imagine that actually can affect your pain when you lose your cool, about anything.
Oh, definitely. I haven't experienced that too much. I think that, just having my practice, sticking with the teachings, allows me to have that more witness mind, the witness mentality, to be able to step back and recognize this as this is a temporary pain or this, whatever it is, being able to see that and pause. And that pause between reaction and action and increasing that and being aware. Very just mindful, I think. Just being very mindful about situations and not, like driving and bad traffic and bad drivers. They don't stress me out much because I just see them as, just a person trying to get by and everyone's trying to be happy and, just understanding, more of a point of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to share really quick before I forget my final appointment with my surgeon afterwards. So once I realized he was Buddhist and then I could talk to him. We could talk a similar language. And after all of my recovery and my final meeting with him, and I know his routine: walking in, shaking my hand, sitting down. But I just really wanted to thank him in a meaningful way. So as soon as he walked in the door's open and facing, like, the other rooms and the nurses and everybody can see him. I just gave him, like, a big, giant hug and just told him, like, really thank you.
Was he off-put by that?
He actually giggled. It was really hilarious. It was really took him by surprise.
It's not a typical medical encounter.
Yeah, no, I wanted him to know, like, this was really meaningful to me for him to be willing to not do everything that every other surgeon just told me and not wanted to discuss any further. Like, he was willing to try a little before a lot, and it meant a lot to me. And, he was really a wonderful person. So I found the right guy.
This is why it's so important to find medical providers that you can trust, that you have rapport with, and that are willing to listen. Yeah.
Right person, right time, all around. I was motivated to do the surgery pretty quickly after meeting him because that was last summer, so May of 2015. This year, July 2016, I'm going to Africa for 2 weeks. So I wanted everything, whatever was going to happen, so that I would know where I was this July. Like I would know what situation I was in physically, have enough time to recuperate, get strong again, do whatever I had to do. That was a real motivator for me also. It was difficult to make the decision to have surgery, though, because, number one, I've had a blood clot in the past. So spinal surgery, major risk factor is blood clots. So I knew that. And that's part of the reason that you put surgery off for a long time, too, right?
Now, Mary,
so it was tough.
So I want to ask you one final question, and then, you can share anything else that you think is important as well. But for anyone who is living with arthritis, we have a lot of people who might listen to this who are already, have already tried yoga or think that it might be helpful. But if there's one thing that you think from your life experience and your yoga experience that that could be useful or inspiring to someone who's struggling or suffering, what would that be?
I think it is really to stick to your practice, even if you have to modify, and I don't mean just physically, like stick to your meditation practice or your pranayama practice or your study practice or whatever the practices are. Stick to it on a regular basis, daily, and take it as your refuge. This is what you're doing for you, but it's not just for you, this physical body. It's for your spirit, for your true self. This practice nourishes us. It gives us that foundation to tackle anything and everything because we're already perfect and whole. We just have a different body this lifetime so we can learn. If I hadn't gone to yoga for my own pain, if I didn't have these injuries, I wouldn't be able to help as many people as I have since then, since I've become a teacher specializing in injuries, helping people along the way. I'm grateful for my injuries. It took me a long time to get to the point of recognizing that, accepting that, and now being incredibly grateful for the body I have because the number of people I've been able to help, and they can go on and do the same thing. It's a blessing to be able to share yoga. It's an amazing honor to teach yoga, and I'm just glad I found it, and just stick with it. Like, stick with it. It is whatever you need it to be on that day in that moment.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
No, I just thank you for the work that you do. I love all the teachers that I've met through the Yoga for Arthritis program. Everybody is just amazing and such caring souls, and they really just want to help everyone, starting with themselves, and then the ripples go from there. So It's a beautiful program. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mary, thanks so much for sharing. I know that you shared so much of yourself, and I'm sure that it's going to be helpful to people listening and inspiring. So
okay, well, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.